Corey Convertito.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and share, some knowledge about Key West handprint fabrics and its connection to Lilly Pulitzer up on the mainland. So if you bear with me just a moment, a couple of bits of housekeeping I have to do. One, I want to share my screen, and two, because this is brought to you by Florida Humanities, I have to share a screen with them and read a blurb from them. Let's see here. All right, I'm hoping, is everyone can folks see my screen?
Yes,
With
you're
the Florida
fine,
Humanities?
Corey.
Okay, super great. So make sure that worked properly. So from the bit of housekeeping I have to do, this presentation today was funded by the Florida Humanities and sponsored in part by the state of Florida, Department of State, and the Division of Arts and Culture, and the Council on Arts and Culture. As the nonprofit statewide partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities, Florida Humanities funds and coordinates public humanities programs and publications that explore the people, places, and ideas that shape the Sunshine State. Florida Humanities has awarded over $20 million in funding since its inception to help create and coordinate current and engaging humanities programming. Programs like these help promote and preserve Florida's diverse heritage and history, promote civic engagement and community dialogue, and provide communities an opportunity to reflect on the future of the state. So as a Florida Humanities speaker, I'm always delighted that we get to do these programs with other organizations through their funding. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about the connection between Lilly Pulitzer, Susie DePoo, and Key West handprint fabrics. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction about what we're going to talk about tonight and then head into the bulk of our presentation. So in 1961, two friends, both who were involved in Broadway theater, visited this beautiful, tranquil island of Key West. Peter Pell and Jimmy Russell, whose names we're going to hear a few times tonight, instantly fell in love with their surroundings. It's not like New York at all. We have brightly colored flowers, exotic fruits, resplendent birds, and remarkable sea life everywhere. And the residents on the island were trying to entice the pair to move down here. And they suggested that they can open a silk screening business on the island, and thereby giving these New Yorkers an excuse to leave their New York lives and relocate down here to paradise. And despite their initial hesitation, they open Key West handprint fabrics, and they begin printing and selling textiles out of a modest building, as we'll see. And before long, they hire, because they're not designers by trade, they hire a designer by the name of Susie Zuzek DePoo, who possessed experience working in the textile industry. And with her classical training, and along with the owners and numerous employees, they're able to produce a marvelous array of tropical imagery on fabric. And production soared, so much so that the factory within a few years has to move into a larger facility. All of this will go through. And in the larger premises, they open retail shops, and there was an increase in our workforce down here. And during the company's peak years, Key West Handprint Fabrics is employing over 150 people, making it, aside from the Navy, we have a Navy base here, it's the lead employer on the island. So quite impactful for our local economy here. They hire artists, silk screeners, seamstresses, retail staff, and office personnel who are going to be tasked with continuing to manufacture unique apparel and home furnishings in their factory, all under the gaze of the general public, who are allowed to come to the factory and watch the screen printing process happen in front of them, something like the image you see before you. While this is all happening here in Key West, the same time that we're taking off, Lilly Pulitzer is up in Palm Beach running a juice stand with a friend. And according to Lilly, she had a seamstress friend of hers design a brightly colored dress for her to wear at work. And the dresses became more popular than her juice. So they both eventually link with one another, Key West Handprint Fabrics and Lilly. And the factory goes on to design and produce the vast majority of the Lilly Lilly Pulitzer collection. So that's where we're getting all of these entities coming together, right place, right time. So that's a bit of a brief synopsis of what we'll be talking about during tonight's presentation. And I like to share this quote early because it sets the stage for me, and I hope you as well, about this symbiotic relationship between the two. And this is a quote from Lilly, and I think it really sums up that important bond between these three entities. And it's taken from an interview with Lilly after she hears about Zuzek Dupu's passing in 2011. It says Susie and I found each other at exactly the right time in our lives. She constantly amused me not only by the genius of her art, but also the sheer number of designs she created. I simply couldn't have done it without her. And I think right away that this is, kind of sets the stage for um, what this talk is all about and how all these parties come together. So this entire story of Lilly Pulitzer and Key West handprint is kind of, to me, a storyline out of a book or a movie. Both entities have these origins in New York, but soon all involved parties find their way to South Florida. For the Key West handprint narrative, and that's where we're going to focus first, we're looking, the first person that we can talk about that helps bring Key West handprint here is the gentleman you're looking at on your screen here, a gentleman by the name of Walter Starkey. He was a U.S. Navy officer turned Broadway actor, director, and producer. He's in New York, and he is appointed assistant director of Roger and Hammerstein's original production of King and I. So he's quite a notable fella, and he's credited in part with helping discover Paul Newman. He liked to tell that story a lot on the island here, who Paul Newman allegedly had walked into his office when he was working as a encyclopedia salesman. So Walter was pretty well connected already. Through his theater connections, he meets and befriends Tennessee Williams, who is living in Key West part-time. And Starkey visits Williams on the island here in 1950. And Starkey loves it. He decides he wants to buy a house here as well, and also invest in other real estate. And that included the Harbor House building, which is also pictured here. This used to be an early Key West bank. He buys it, refurbs the building, and now wants to find a purpose for it. In walks these two gentlemen, Jimmy Russell and Peter Pell. Just as Starkey's building is ready for business, he runs into these two friends of his, Pell and Russell. And Jimmy is a choreographer and a stage manager, and actually both of them are working on Broadway. He told the pair that he had this sort of perfect enterprise that they can work in, to open this silk screening business down here. We're not really sure where the idea came from and why these two, but I think they were looking for an excuse to get out of New York. So Jimmy, who was a Broadway performer as well, he was actually in Coconut Grove on the mainland, in a production of On the Town, and that's why they come down here. They come visit Starkey and Tennessee Williams. So they come here, and that's during this vacation. The pair fall in love with this place. They love the quaintness, they love the architecture, and I think they start strategizing how they can stay here. Another one, there was a little bit of trepidation, but I think our laid back attitude and the gay friendly culture, these two gentlemen were gay, so this sort of more loose culture down here, I kind of think helped them decide to come to the island. Pell has an understanding of the screen printing process, but by no means were either one of them a textile designer. In order for this business to work, Key West Handprint Fabrics would have to design everything in-house, and print screens the old-fashioned way. Newer technology was just too expensive. These guys were broke. They were furnishing the building. They were grabbing furnishings out of bars that were no longer open down here and trying to just shoot this budget quickly, and get it up and running and be able to make money. And what they wanted to do was create something that no one else was creating anywhere else. No one had, according to them, used the Caribbean as a motif for fabric before. And that's what they were really trying to do. So Stark and Pell and Russell knew they had something special with the Key West name and had always had that romantic allure. And more importantly, they knew they had something in the natural aesthetic of the island. There was florals galore, there were animals that were unknown in other parts of the country, bright sunshine, and really distinctive architecture, all of which could be presented on fabrics. So the business opens in 1961. And they were doing things very small scale, printing tea towels, tropical placemats, table linens, scarves, very, very tiny portable things, and keeping the designs quite simple at that time. And this is just another view of the Harbor House with Key West handprint fabrics there. This new business occupies the ground floor of this building, which it used as a retail space, and they had use of the entire second floor. They had about 6,000 square feet. Wasn't going to be enough as they start getting going. As I say, they kind of bootstrapped this, fitting it out because they wanted to be open to the public. So they wanted a space where it felt comfortable and inspiring. So they certainly fit that out with the attention that the public was going to be able to visit. They bring in a fourth partner at that point, Bill Johnson, who was a good businessman. I mean, all these guys were working in the theater. They needed somebody with a head for business, so they bring someone else on. So now there's 4 men running this business, and within a year, the business grows to be able to employ about 21 people, including 12 seamstresses. And the new staff also included a designer. This is quite important, to work along with Peter, who had been doing the designing. And it's a young artist by the name of Susie Zuzek Dupuy. And we're going to talk about her a little bit later, but it's important to acknowledge that Susie's on staff pretty early on, from the beginning. As I say, the 4 owners had no clue really what they were doing. And Susie was the only one who truly knew anything about textile design. She had worked in that field and had relevant experience. And they issue a press release a year after Key West Handprint is open. And this runs in the Key West Citizen. And it says, which is our local newspaper, the biggest tourist attraction Key West is offering these summer days is the ever popular conch sightseeing train. The next big attraction for visitors is a tour of the Key West Fabrics Factory, where they may see the silk screening process on fabric stretched across 90 feet long tables, hung on low racks to dry, and put on curing ovens and rolled out in huge bolts. So that company is garnering attention of about a year after it opens. So this new Key West business that was turning out brightly colored fabrics caught the attention of another relatively new business in South Florida, one that was run by the Palm Beach socialite by the name of Lily Pulitzer. That business started approximately 2 years before handprint, and there's a lot of similarities that we're going to talk about that brings these 2 entities together. So I'm going to kind of just sidetrack a little and give you some history on Lily, and then we'll fold in how these entities come together. So Lily's born Lily Lee McKim, and she's the great granddaughter of Jabez A. Bostwick, one of John D. Rockefeller's founding partners in Standard Oil. So her wealthy family does afford her a private school upbringing, where she befriends a lot of children from other well-to-do families. One of those families that sends their daughter to the same private school is a girl by the name of Patsy Pulitzer. She introduced Lily to her brother, Herbert Pulitzer, who went by the name Henry all the time, who was a Palm Beach socialite and a bit of a ne'er-do-well, and an heir to the publishing empire started by his grandfather, Joseph Pulitzer. So the 2 elope when she was 21 years old, and Lily moves to Palm Beach, where the Pulitzer family was pretty well established. The couple, though, in Palm Beach are a bit of an oddity. They never truly fit in. They like to party a lot, and they seldom felt obligated to attend the important social functions. They wanted to do their own thing and enjoyed it immensely. They stuck out and were known for snubbing proper upper class protocols. And friends who knew this couple thought the affluent people mistook them for bohemians because they just dressed in not appropriate for Palm Beach standards at the time. Lily was a woman who never cared much for fashion. She was most of the time barefoot, oftentimes had a scarf on her head. And admittedly, and one of the things she always liked to tell people, at least in Key West, who remember her being here, was that she hated wearing underpants and she seldom did. And again, I think that's just kind of show how Lily was, and why she enjoyed Key West so much, as we'll see. Settling into Palm Beach, Lily and Harry had 3 children in a short period of time. And although she was not diagnosed with it at the time, not many women were. Lily suffered with what we probably assumed to be a postpartum depression, and she was sent away for a while to what she liked to call the nut house. Doctors told her while she was there, she needed to find a hobby, make herself find something that made her feel happy. Her husband, Henry, owned citrus groves, and the story that, the stories vary, of course, and the way Lily even told it varied from time to time. But Henry told her to sell some of the fruit from his citrus groves. And she would explain that she had a station wagon, and she would just deliver fruit from his citrus groves house to house. And then she went and had a storefront, and would put little gift boxes together of citrus fruit, and then she got a little juice stand, where she can sell bags of fruit. She ends up meeting and going into business with this fruit selling business with a friend and a former fashion editor from Harper's, whose name is Laura Clark. And the pair not only sold fruit, they started selling fresh squeezed juices. It's hot out, it's a wonderful treat to have fresh squeezed orange juice and lemonade and limeade. And so the two of them being together, one who was not fashion conscious at all and one who was quite heightened to it all, they come up with this idea for Lily's brand because of this fashion of this juice stand. Story again from Lily goes that she went to her Palm Beach seamstress with some patterned fabric that she was able to find at a five and dime store. And she wants her to make a shift dress. Lily always wanted to be comfortable no matter what she did. So she wants a shift dress, nice and loose. And she had picked out a very busy pattern, because she was getting a lot of fruit stains. The juice from the oranges and the grapefruits were staining her clothing. She wanted something that wouldn't make it as noticeable. So she wore her shift dresses that the seamstress was making for her with this, bolts of fabric that she was getting pretty cheap. And customers started asking where she got her clothing from. She and Laura decided to buy more fabric and possibly make a few dresses that could be for sale at the juice stand. And soon enough, the dresses were selling much better than the juice was at the juice stand. And so Lily's business partner remembered that they go to West Palm Beach and kept buying whatever remnants they could find. They were not trying to spend a lot of money, that this was not a business to them. They were just kind of a little side hustle for them at the time. And they were selling them for about $20 to $25 a piece. And there was a stampede of women in Palm Beach who were attracted to these dresses. I mean, they're cool and comfortable. So, and this at the time was opposite to what the women of Palm Beach were wearing. This was the late 1950s, early 1960s. Socialites were embracing haute couture that was coming right out of France at the time. You've got to think about Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, Givenchy. That was what was in vogue at the time. So these dresses that Lily is coming up with and wearing is definitely not the norm. Her dresses, which were dubbed lilies, were brightly colored and they were comfortable for our very hot Florida weather. This opposite to what's the designs that were coming out of Europe or the high street in New York. And she starts designing her dresses. She puts in cotton lining so she can wear them without underpants, and again, but that's a nice Florida add-on, where other clothing is not having lining, and when it's this hot out, having that lining was important, and that made its popularity grow as well. And many Palm Beach socialites felt that Lily's dress was just going to be a passing fad and would last a couple of years. And truly, they couldn't have been more wrong about it. The clothes sold because they were unlike anything else on the market, and they were comfortable for the climate that they were being sold. And a key, of course, to Lily's early success in this business was her network of society women. Everybody she knew from growing up, many of whom she had met and kept in touch with from boarding school. Some of them were based in Palm Beach, some were not. But none of them were as influential on her brand as much as Jackie Kennedy. And it was after the First Lady is photographed on the Isle of Capri with her sister Lee wearing a polka dot Lilly Pulitzer shift dress in 1962 that the business really exploded. The three, Lily, Jackie, and Lee, had been classmates at a boarding school together. That's how all of this had come together. And then later that same year, Jackie Kennedy wears the same dress with her husband, which is what you're seeing here on the left-hand side, for Life magazine, wearing this dress in Hyannisport. Even her mother-in-law, who's on the right-hand picture, wore a Lily along with her daughter Kathleen. Then this is actually designed by Key West Handprint Fabrics by a different designer, not Susie DePoo, because this comes a little bit later when the two entities are together. So people are wearing Lilies, they're wearing Key West Handprint Fabrics, and it just explodes. Aside from the Kennedy family, there were several other fashionable and influential women who wore Lily shift dresses, including members of the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Whitneys, you name it, they're wearing Lilies. And really, since the brand was so popular with ladies of high society, Pulitzer started getting this nickname as the Queen of Prep because of these folks wearing it. So using remnants from Palm Beach, and that's what she was doing, was not going to keep Lily in business, right? She learned of fabrics being produced in Key West and wanted to find out more because the two were doing very similar things. Our local business here in Key West was producing these brightly colored patterns, something Lily was very much interested in. And she had lots of ideas, but she wasn't a designer. She wasn't a seamstress. She was well connected and she knew what worked. So one version of our story of how Lily comes to find out, and again from her, and she told the story in very different ways, was the way that was most consistent was that her Lily's mother and Lily's sister had come to Key West. They were traveling on their yacht. Their yacht had a bit of a maintenance issue, so they had docked here in Key West, and they were wandering around town while their yacht was being fixed. They stumble into Key West Handprint because it's right in the marina area, perfectly placed for that. And the mother grabs swatches of fabric from Key West Handprints to bring back to Lily. Lily, on that basis, decides to fly down to Key West on her plane and have a look at the operation. Not only did she feel her business model was aligned with handprint fabrics, she admittedly fell in love with the island. It was much more her speed. We're a little more laid back down here, and that's exactly what Lily and Henry were all about. And you know, she liked the colors, she liked the attitude, and she certainly enjoyed the bars here as well. So while she's here, she has a meeting with Peter Pell. Lily left with an order of 500 yards of fabric just to test the waters to see how it would go. Then she called from the airport to amend her order to 1,000 yards. And then when she gets back home, according to, again, stories from her, Henry, her husband, urges her saying, why are you buying such a small amount of fabric? If you're going to do it, jump in. And she calls and changes it to 3,000 yards of fabric if she was going to be serious about this resort wear business she was starting. So overnight, Pulitzer becomes Key West Handprint Fabrics' largest wholesale customer. She used the company's fabrics almost exclusively. It's about 80 to 90% of Lily Pulitzer's designs were created and printed by Key West Handprint Fabrics. And in turning to Key West Handprint Fabrics, Pulitzer was able to meet the head designer, who's Susie Zuzek, who's pictured here on the screen. And she's really the brains behind the operation. And she has got this background and knowledge that Lily needs at that precise moment. So kind of going to sidebar over to to Susie. She was the lead designer for handprint fabrics. She was born just outside of Gowanda, New York, kind of outside of Buffalo. And unlike Lily, Agnes is what was her given name, was not born into money. Instead, she was the youngest of five children. They were Yugoslavian immigrant parents, and she picked up the name Susie because people had difficulty pronouncing her last name of Zuzak. So people just started calling her Susie, and the name stuck. No one called her Agnes. She enlists to serve in the Women's Army Corps during World War II. And it was her war service, and more specifically, the GI Bill that she gets, that she's eligible for after the end of the war, which provides her with a formal art education. She studies textile design and commercial illustration at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and she's also at the Art Student League, also in New York. And once she's done with her schooling, she works for 3 years for a Manhattan-based textile company called Herman Blanc, where she was creating drapery and dress fabric. And in college, and it's kind of crazy, to hear these stories about how everybody gets here. But so she's in college herself, much like Lily was, very different schools, of course. Her roommate is a gal named Jeannie Porter, and she's the great granddaughter of one of Key West's most famous residents, Dr. Yates Porter. And it was through Susie that meets and marries a man named John DePue, who's the son of a doctor down here as well. And that's how she finds her way. They're still in New York and they have a couple of children, but they're going to find a way back to his island. But it's all through these connections they have in college. But as I say, John's native island was calling. So in 1954, Susie and the children and her husband move to Key West, and she wants to continue designing textiles for New York, which she continues to do on a freelance basis. But really, she wanted to be an artist. She didn't want to necessarily be a textile designer. So she had more free time here and starts focusing on sculptural art, mosaics, etc. And she has this real classical style to what she created. And we'll be able to see that as I show you some examples of her work and the work that she created for Lily. And this classical art style, but encompassing and incorporating bright colors like no one had ever seen before, was what got her the job as the lead designer at Key West Handprint Fabrics. And you can see a picture of Susie here at work at Key West Handprint Fabrics. So she gets that job pretty early on when the company opens. And this classical training at Pratt, as well as her experience as a textile designer, certainly prepares her for this position at the factory. From the early 1960s, Susie's creating landscapes, seascapes, floral patterns, these dreamy celestial scenes. And it really reflects this natural beauty of the Florida Keys in South Florida. And she's using her work for textiles, for tea towels, placemats, etc. But she wants to elevate the profile. She doesn't want to stick to the tea towels and things. She has bigger, grander designs. And that really comes through when she meets Lily. So when Lily flies to Key West to meet with Jimmy Russell and Peter Pell, and she also meets with Susie. And Lily viewed the designs that are already in production at Handprint Fabrics and felt that these two entities could work together for the Lilly Pulitzer Company. And eventually Lilly Pulitzer, she starts her business in about 1959, but she fully incorporates in 1962. So it's a year after Handprint. All these things are magically happening simultaneously. And Key West Handprint, under the direction of Susie, creates exclusive designs for Lilly Pulitzer and fabrics for Lily's factory. So what the caveat was at the time was that whatever design Susie had to create, she can create for Key West Handprints. It could not be used by Lily, and Lily, the designs created by Lily could not be sold by Key West Handprint Fabrics, meaning she was an enormously busy woman creating unique designs without any overlap, as not to compete with each other because we're in a very similar market. And I'm going to show you how Susie created this artwork. So this is Susie started with a watercolor drawing that she would create. This is a Lily design. and everything has a live edge to it, meaning each side, whether the top edge, the sides edge, and the bottom, if you put it next to each other, beneath each other, the ends would match up. And I'm going to show you what I mean. So this is going to be, I'm going to put up the same image, but next to each other. So you're going to see that's the same exact image. Now you can see how those two blend together. Now I'm going to add another one at the bottom. So those live edges completely marry up with one another, meaning she can make a small design and it can be repeated as big as you wanted it to be. When you're printing, which allowed for them to create huge bolts of fabric, but only have to create the small artwork. The other thing that Susie did, per Lily, is in the design had to incorporate Lily's name. And it's subtle, and sometimes it's really difficult to discern, but you can see here, I've circled them for you. I hope you can see them, that the name Lily has come through in different parts of that image. So you knew that was a Lily design specifically and not a Key West handprint design. I'm going to show you a few other examples. This is also a Lily, very subtle. You can see where the Lily, and that design in particular is hard to peel out, but certainly it was there and as part of the design. Another one, you'll be able to see, I'll circle these for you, Lily in the butterfly wings, earmarking that's a Lily design and not a Key West handprint design. This elephant, this is a close-up, and you're able to see Lily as part of the elephant's ear. These are all designed by Key West handprint fabrics. Again, you can see Lily in the detail on the seashell there. Some of the puffins, again, Lily. None of these could have been used for Key West handprint fabrics. Certainly very prolific in that. This relationship between Lily and handprint was symbiotic and really synergetic in a way. For all intents and purposes, the heads of these businesses were amateurs. Nobody had like a real working knowledge of running these businesses. Lily was not a designer. She had no sewing skills, and she had never owned a business prior to the fruit and juice stand. And likewise, the men who had owned Key West handprint fabrics were also greenhorns. They all were theater professionals. They didn't know what they were doing. And really they're using the strengths of each other to promote both businesses. I mean, her connections and having Susie here as the designer was able to churn out this vast amount of material that was required for the overwhelming demand of Lily Pulitzer's. And Lily recognized how important both industries were to one another. Again, this, as I say, symbiotic and synergetic. She was interviewed for an article in the New York Journal American within a few months of entering into a business arrangement with handprint. And she says, we were awfully lucky to find 4 boys in Key West who do their own silk screening. It's lucky because I can't draw a thing. I'll say, I want something in a wild orange with yellow, and they'll turn out beautiful prints for me. The thing she doesn't mention here is the contribution of Susie to that. But really, she's the linchpin of that entire relationship. And Lily knows right away how fortunate she is to fall in with these guys and vice versa. Due to Lily's socialite connections and her affluent friends donning her dresses, these simple shift dresses of the 1960s and even into the 1970s, it earned her an immediate and devout following. What most people realize or don't realize, as a matter of fact, is that much of the credit is due to Susie and Key West handprint fabric workers for the success of her business. She sourced during her heyday about 98% of her fabric and all her prints from 1962 to 1985 from Key West handprint fabrics. And while it was owned and operated by the namesake, once the company sells, we aren't really going to go into that much, but once it sells, they get their own designers in-house. But while Lily is owning and operating that company, she is using Key West handprint fabrics almost exclusively. And Key West handprint fabrics is benefiting largely dependent on large orders from Lily. To just do the fabric, and they would be sewn. She had seamstresses on the mainland. Here's Lily here pictured with Peter Pell was often in Key West. She was here frequently, and that because she wanted to be part of the design process. She also liked a little entertainment and away from prying eyes in Palm Beach as well. And employees, as you know, when we were doing research on this topic, I talked to a lot of employees who remember Lily just sprawled out on the wicker sofa in the design department, going through drawings both for women's and men's fashion. She'd fly to Key West and visit with the staff and pick out her fabrics for her next collection. And they would spend the day involved in business, and then they'd go to the bar to celebrate afterward. And she very much enjoyed doing that here away from, I think, that Palm Beach scene. And the demand for Lily steadily increased, meaning that the demands for Key West handprint fabrics also increased. That meant that staff had the ability to churn out some 4,000 yards of fabric per week. It's a lot because it's labor intensive, it's hands-on. But soon it was evident that they had outgrown the capacity of their original building. And they started opening their own stores, Key West handprint branded retail shops in places like Coconut Grove, Fort Lauderdale, Silver Springs, and even on Nantucket, kind of capturing that the Kennedy connection there. So they had to grow into their own, a much larger building. So in 1965, they constructed a building that would better suit their needs of their flourishing building. And they're going from 6,000 square feet to almost 24,000 square feet. And had more tables, and that meant they can have a bigger retail space, more onlookers and tourists can come in, a chemistry lab, an art studio, a fashion workshop, and business offices as well. So they start growing on the basis. The new building officially opened for business, and again, Key West handprint, a much larger production and retail space. And this is from the opening night from our local newspaper, and the list of attendees at the opening of this were read like a who's who of Key West and Palm Beach. The list included our mayor, Tennessee Williams was there, and Lily Pulitzer had flown down for that opening as well. And they did demonstrations for all the folks that were there, and really just the business keeps exploding. The move to the property, they designed a new logo, which is kind of a neat thing because the site had been an old pineapple cannery on there, and there was a strangler fig that kept part of the brick building because it strangled the brick, so it stayed, and they incorporated that. And you'd see that and more in Key West handprint fabric labels later on. Now, only 6 years after its founding, handprint found itself in a new building, and the profits were soaring. The new building afforded the company enough space to triple or quadruple its production figures. It also grew in the number of employees, and its impact on our local business was pretty considerable. They were making a lot of money here, and there's a few images from the inside of the Key West handprint retail shop in that new building. And again, just a few more images of the retail shop, promotional shots that they were using. So that and they started changing the dynamic of what they were creating. Not only they were always doing like Lily's and resort wear, but they start branching out. They decide, along with Lily, who kind of launches at the same time, to broaden into other creations, and that included men's apparel, and you can kind of see that from this Key West handprint fabrics ad here. Upholstery fabrics, wall paneling, draperies, and fabrics for the home, something Susie was very comfortable in. And really they did a foray into men's fashion, and brightly colored jeans. I love looking at some of these old ads. You can see these are Lily Pulitzer, but very similar to the Key West handprint ad I just showed you. Lily envisioned a menswear collection that would extend beyond bright jeans that you can see here. She had long range plans for Bermuda shorts, swimming trunks, sports jackets, and even men's velvet evening jackets to be in a printed design. So they were really thinking pretty broad. I mean, you can see a pair of Lily men's swim trunks here. And in the picture that we saw a little earlier, where she's holding hands with Peter Pell as they're on a boat here in Key West, you can see he's wearing Key West handprint fabric men's pants. And this is one of my favorite images, just to show what the men's collection that's being put out by Handprint and Lily in all different patterns. Now the business keeps growing, and as a testament to that, they have to occupy a second building. They purchased an old tobacco warehouse down here, and they're using this specifically as a sewing factory. So they move a lot of the logistical parts of it to like the seamstress. They open another retail outlet here. They do have a couple more printing tables, but it's not for public because they need to increase their capabilities here for printing. And the thing about it is, Susie, to me, Pell, as this business is growing and growing and growing, Peter and Jimmy were often pictured with Lily in newspapers and magazines, but truly Susie is at the quiet architect of all of this. Pell's designs, Pell did design some patterns for the socialite, but it really is Susie between 1962 and 85. She creates some 2,000 unique designs over the course of her career. That can't be easy. And plus being an artist in her own right, outside of work, creating art at home on her home time, and being at this point a single mother. She creates designs in floral, animal, and mystical patterns that are wildly popular, are all designed by Susie. And here, designed by Susie, and these are going to be for handprint fabrics. She designed the prints, and the colors were worked out by other artists, including Pell. And what they did was try to do 2 to 3 to 4 colors. They try to stick to 2 if they can, so they can create use one pattern and create different color combinations, so they will look different using only one of Susie's designs. And we can see a few more samples here. She, and again, designed the prints, but the colors are worked out by other people, including Pell. And you can see she signed all of these double Lily, although that's a bit close to Lily, by Susie Zuzak. And just another one of hers. You can see just sort of the intricate ink work that she does. Not all of them were watercolors. Sometimes some were watercolor and ink. Again, just the diverse sort of patterns that she was creating, and the different colors that were utilized within that. And here's a great example. The Key West Handprint Fabrics began mailing out these sample books. This is from 1972, and it was a small swatch of a pattern, but in whatever colors it was available. And it's hard to tell because you're getting just a small section in the mail, but the top design and the bottom are exactly not the same as each other, but the yellow and pink are the same, and the bottom pink and the green and blue are the same design. They're just printed using different color inks, and they give off a completely different feel from each other. So Susie can do one design, but they can create things that will appeal to different folks. And again, same thing, the pattern on the top over there is called ruffles, and same pattern, different colors, gems, same design, different ink. So you're able to see how the company can diversify with one pattern, but be able to mix different colors together and attract to a much larger audience. And then you'd order by mailing in your quantity, and you can just buy bolts of the fabric and have your local seamstress create something for you, or you can buy dresses by themselves. And this is from the Citizen. Sorry, the date got cut. It was 1978. The date shifted down a little bit. And what it says is the Key West Handprint Fabrics Factory employs more than 150 employees at its operation. And at this time, there's 21 other shops throughout the country, most in Florida, but now we've branched to South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Massachusetts, Maryland, and Texas. So this business, because of Lily, is certainly growing pretty enormously. And this is where we're riding high, but it's not going to last forever. One of the founders of Key West Handprint, Peter Pell, he died in 1981. Lily, who was already so ingrained in the local business, decides to purchase Pell's shares in Key West Handprint Fabric. So she has Lily Pulitzer, but she buys into Key West Handprint. And for the for the first time in both companies' histories, Lilies were being sold alongside Key West Handprint fabric dresses. So if you walked into a Key West Handprint fabric store, you can buy a Lily or you can buy a handprint. This didn't really work well. It wasn't thought out really well. Again, she wasn't a great businesswoman either. And these soaring sales of the 80s, the 70s and 80s were just not destined to last. And it all kind of comes, lots of things have the way that it comes together in such a great way. It kind of dispels in that same fashion. Because then you're going to have the 1980s, and the 1980s were all about earth tones and shoulder pads and power suits, and women who had worn Lilies were now in the workforce a lot more, and they were wearing things like Calvin Klein and Donna Karan, and they didn't want to wear tropical resort wear into an office. They wanted to be taken more seriously and dressed appropriate for that. And in early 1984, Lily brought a new management team into Key West Handprint Fabrics. She cut back on the number of her stores and her manufacturing center that was based in Hialeah. But really it was on the way out. And by the end of 1984, Lily Pulitzer Company had filed for Chapter 11. Pulitzer's declining business has a drastic impact on Key West Handprint Fabrics. She was a 51% shareholder at the time that she bought in, and because her business was not placing large orders, we were dependent here on wholesale orders, as had been the case in previous decades. Handprint then had to cut down dramatically on its workforce, mainly in the fabric production department. They were trying to keep the retail end of it going if they could, but eventually the finances got so dire that Handprint was under the threat of closure once Lily had filed for bankruptcy. Someone had to step in and purchase her 51%. And late in 1985, some local business people here that owned a few other things on our island put in a bid to take over the shares and Handprint on the brink of the factory closing down. The factory did close for about a month, and some of the staff that were laid off at the time were brought back once the business was purchased. Then they solely were functioning out of one building instead of two, so they sold the other building. But really, it didn't matter, that it was out of fashion and it was not running well. And really, without, and this is the way we'll sum it up, without this large client and with a shift in fashion trend, Key West Handprint Fabrics closes its door completely in 2009, leaving behind a vibrant collection of drawings and fabrics and stores from people that work there, as well as visitors to the factory. And that includes one of your attendees tonight who got married wearing a Key West handprint dress. And the story of this Lily Pulitzer, or this Key West Handprint Fabrics, and this Lily Pulitzer is really a fascinating one. And I hope you've enjoyed as I've gone through this, because to me, it's a very improbable tale. It brings together a group of men with no experience in design or textile in a place that they were barely familiar with. And more crucially, it brings together two extremely different women from New York. They both come from New York, both very different social settings, who were able to successfully navigate the fashion industry in a seemingly separate spheres from one another. Somehow they make it work, and they're very successful at it. And I think thanks to a recent relaunch of the Lily Pulitzer brand, Lily's once again a household name. They've come back into favor, although Key West Handprint Fabrics has nothing to do with it. And on the back of that, though, and one of the reasons I put this talk together is really because Susie remains this unknown entity who was the mastermind in a lot of ways behind the successfulness of both of these businesses. She and Lily and Key West Handprint Fabrics share responsibility. Or so I say, Susie and Key West Handprint Fabrics do share a lot of responsibility for Lily's enduring success. And I hope that I've been able to come through with a lot of that information tonight and see how those businesses and connecting mainland, Florida with little old us down here in the Florida Keys. And because this is funded by the Florida Humanities, I need to just share this last slide with you and read their closing statement. Thank you for your time and attention. This presentation today was funded by Florida Humanities and is sponsored in part by the State of Florida Department of State and the Division of Arts and Culture and the Council on Arts and Culture. Florida Humanities appreciates feedback about your experience today. If there's a link on the screen, you'll have to type it in. You won't be able to click on it. To share your thoughts about today's program, which we encourage you to do. That means organizations like Boynton Beach Historical Society, as well as our organization, which is also a nonprofit, reaps the benefits of that because they have funding that allows us to have these types of programs. For the latest information and to find other events near you, we encourage you to sign up for Florida Humanities newsletters. Okay, that's it. I'm happy to, I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'm happy to, if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer any that I can.
Nora, did anybody type questions?
Let's see if we can get Nora to unmute. Thank you, Dr. Convertito. That was wonderful.
So much fun.
Good, thank you. I love the connection.
Yes, makes a person want to drive south.
Anytime.
One of the first questions was from Janet, is there any correlation with the Hawaii Honolulu hand printed fabrics for muumuus?
No, I mean, there isn't. I mean, they're going to have some inspiration somewhere for sure. But they're doing their own process. A lot of the, the inspiration, they start probably around the same time, and they're going to pull from one another in that way, looking at those same motifs, the flowers, the birds, sun. Where I think where handprint and Lily differ quite significantly is because of Susie's classical training. There's a lot of patterns that come through that are very Grecian and Roman and celestial, and you're not going to find that nearly as much in prints that are coming from Hawaii for muumuus. So certainly, and the style of the dresses were not the same, particularly where Lily is concerned. She, even though they were loose fitting, they were not that loose fitting. Generally speaking, they would do a few. Same for handprint. They did a little bit more form fitting dresses, but certainly the subject matter varied wildly, and where muumuus tended to be pretty funneled into the same type of motifs. That's a great question.
And the next question was, did handprint also print the Florida Souvenir tablecloths?
So the Florida Souvenir Company was a separate entity down here, and they did a lot they did do tablecloths, and they did a lot of like purses, and they diversified the product. So they were not related to one another. And I think they were based in Marathon, which is about midway between here and Miami. So no, but I'm sure the successfulness of him, what is the highest flattery is somebody copying what you're doing. So I think that's probably,
of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Janet also asked, Susie sounds wonderful. Thank you for sharing her story. Did she go on to work on other art projects?
Susie was an artist in her own right. She created work outside. It wasn't just that she was a paid designer. The time that Susie had to herself, she created just a crazy amount of art. I don't think the woman slept. I'm quite sure of this. She certainly we have a beach down here where everybody used, because we're a small island, all the bottles, like all the glass bottles that used to have milk and alcohol and medicine, everybody buried their bottles in the same place on this island, and now because it's all been tumbled around, it's beautiful sea glass. And Susie was out there constantly forging around for sea glass to create sculptures, mosaics. I mean, she would do, and she loved found material. She was quite frugal in a way, but she was a single mom with 3 kids and had a paying gig and was selling her artwork. But she loved found material to incorporate into her own artwork, and she was set up as an artist down here as well. I mean, it's incredible. Wire sculptures, oh God, I mean, crazy what she would do. There wasn't anything she wouldn't paint on.
Well, those are all the questions from the chat. If anybody else has anything else.
There's one more. Where does either business stand today? From Kay Gates.
For Key West Handprint Fabrics, it's completely closed. It closed in 2009. A couple of years ago, somebody, a private entity, purchased the archive from Key West Handprint Fabrics. That was all the designs. That's where a lot of our information came from, as we worked with this private entity. Patterns, they still had the transparencies that they used, with all the color, the actual color codes, and a card catalog. It was quite incredible. So that's all with a private entity now, and I know, and they bought the rights to it as well. So they have the copyright went with it. So I think they're planning some wonderful things to do with it. I'm not really sure where that is. Now, Lily, when she passed away, the company had been bankrupt. They've revived the company. And so they do have flagship stores around the country. I know that they do, they roll out, like Target stores, they'll do some lower end Lily Pulitzer as well. But there seems to be a renaissance of her work more recently, but I think that's just what's come back into fashion as well. So it's not run by her and the family anymore. Somebody is using the Lily Pulitzer name and running it as a business because they bought her out after the Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
And M. Free writes, I have a vintage Lily shipped dress from the early 1960s. It's a black and white print. So now I will have to figure out if the fabric came from Key West.
Oh, I can tell you in a
tips?
heartbeat. If you feel free to send me an email with a picture of it, and I'm so well versed in Susie's work, I can tell straight away if it's her or someone else from the factory, or if it came from the 2% that was created outside of Key West.
Let's see, M. Free, would you like to unmute and tell us what that fabric looks like?
Well, every time I've worn the dress, people try to buy it from me. Luckily, I can't fit in it anymore, so that helps. I will have to find a picture of it. My stuff is in storage right now, but it's really one of my treasured possessions. And I know it's very early 1965, maybe 67.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. I put my email in the chat, so whenever you do come across it, please, I'd love to see it.
Great presentation.
Thanks. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? You may unmute yourself or enter it in chat.
Is some of her fabrics in a museum down there somewhere?
We hold quite a bit in our museum, and we are always on the lookout for anything we can find, especially the earlier period. We have a lot from the 1960s and 70s, and quite frankly, every time you walk into Salvation Army or any thrift store down here, from folks, usually it's like an estate sale clear out, I can find handprint fabrics galore. Little more less and less now that Lily's kind of found this reemergence. People are on the lookout for fabrics, and actually there was an exhibit up at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York, which is the Smithsonian Design Museum up there, and they did an exhibit on Lily Pulitzer and Susie Dupuy, and we've seen prices go up. I mean, I'm on eBay all the time looking for things that look interesting for us as well, and they've certainly become more available, but the price point has also gone up accordingly.
Corey, where are you located in Key West? I've been to a number of museums there, the library, Mel Fisher, and also the Custom House. And which is
My office is at the Custom House. That's where
Okay.
our administrative offices are, but we operate 4 museums, but that's where I'm based most of the
well, I
time.
was wondering, and it is a great museum. The staff is great there.
Well, thank you. I'll pass that feedback along to them.
Right.
They work hard and they love what they do.
Good.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Thank you for joining us tonight, everyone. And if I may take one more moment of your time, please join me in thanking Barbara Reedy for an excellent season of programming. And we hope you have a great summer, and we'll see you again in the fall.